Hi, I'm Tony Bravo, and we're here with the filmmakers of House of Cardin, P David Ebersole and Todd Hughes. Welcome.
Thank you.
Hi, thank you.
Thank you.
I'm so pleased to be here with you. Welcome to Frameline44, a digital pride showcase, all from our living rooms where the people will be watching it also.
I know it's a whole new world, right?
So speaking of whole new worlds, let's just talk about the man of the hour, Pierre Cardin. I feel like he imagined the future that we live in some ways, but also the future that I would really love to live in. I would love to look like a Pierre Cardin model from 1967 and those bubble shapes and those great textures and that wonderful vision. It just seems so optimistic about what the future could be. Was that part of what attracted you to the subject?
Absolutely. We're both kind of Cardinophiles. We love Pierre Cardin design, we love the style, and I think that we both sort of live out of that kind of optimistic ethic. It's funny because, you know, when you talk about futurism today, everything is dystopian. Like everything is about how it's all going to fall apart and how everything is going to be miserable in the future. And back then, when they were imagining the future from early 1960s, they were saying the world is open, everything is a possibility. So yeah, we resonate to that, definitely.
Okay, so before we go any further, this is a fashion documentary. I'm going to need you both to show off the Cardin fashion.
All right, let me start. I am wearing a caftan today.
Give him room.
Easy.
Pure mahogany.
And it's made from 8 Pierre Cardin vintage
Scarves.
scarves. Yeah. And David designed it with our neighbor Rhonda.
And I'm just in a simple little floral suit, but I have my branding ready for you, my Pierre Cardin branding on.
Well, I love the caftan especially. You know that San Francisco is kind of a caftan town. Not as much.
Palm Springs.
Yeah. Palm Springs may have you.
Has had old queens and caftans with tumblers of cocktails since 1972.
A couple of our queens up here, I'm thinking Juanita Moore and Honey Mahogany especially, are caftan girls all the way.
All right.
So let's talk a little bit about the world that you led us into in the beginning parts of this documentary. I was so mesmerized by the way you were able to evoke this queer Paris that Cardin first found himself in. I guess in the mid-1940s, there were people like Jean Cocteau and his partner Jean Marais there. Tell me a little bit about bringing the viewer into that queer moment.
Well, our own queer moment of becoming friends with this incredible man who was so nice and so generous and so open. And we were in Lacoste, which is a town in the south of France where the Marquis de Sade's castle is that he bought and has the music festival. But he really started telling us the intimate details of his time with Jean Cocteau and Jean Marais. And he was saying, oh yeah, Jean Marais and I would cook dinner for each other at night. And I'd go over to his apartment and he'd take me for boat rides on the Seine.
Right, crazy.
And we're like, what? Oh my God. And you know, that's when we asked him, like, how did you find yourself in the middle of all these amazing people? And he said, I was, you know, really good looking. And they were all kind of
Everybody wanted to sleep
with
me.
me.
But it's funny because then he actually talked about it. There's only so much that we can get into the documentary. We have the 4-hour version, which believe me, nobody wants to watch. So there's all those sort of additional details that are a little bit outside of the movie. But he told us about how how they would sort of support each other, that they spent all that he came to Paris as a young man and immediately found himself in that whole artistic milieu, and that people were actively kind of helping each other get ahead. So it was really a beautiful time. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And he said he really made the decision to not go that route. Like, I don't think he'd come out yet himself, but he definitely said, you know, I could have had a quick road had I been nicer to certain people, but I didn't want to do that. And I think also he's Catholic, and I think the gay thing for him was kind of hard. And it wasn't until he met Andre Oliver, I think, that he allowed himself to fall in love with the man.
Yeah, in 1950.
And then was with him.
Yeah.
You know?
What was the initial connection to Cardin? Did he approach you? Did you approach the House of Cardin?
It was kind of divine providence. We were in Paris and we were shopping for Les Disques Pierre Cardin. He owns a record label as well. Todd's obsessed with the record label. And so we collect them, and they're easier to find in Europe than they are here. So we went to a Paris flea market looking for them. And we were coming back into the Marais where we were staying, and we were walking sort of towards the Pompidou, and we passed the Musée Cardin. And we were like, there's a museum for Pierre Cardin? And it was closed. And so next door, there was this kind of beautiful little shop that was called Evolution, is that what it's called? Yeah. And we went in and we were showing the very handsome young man who worked there our, new purchase of our Disques Pierre Cardin. And then I had on my phone all these things from our house, and we own a 1972 Pierre Cardin edition AMC Javelin, which was on my phone. And he said, oh, Mr. Cardin loves people like you who collect what he does. You should try to meet him.
And we were like,
we'd love to.
We never thought about it. We never thought there was a person, right? We were obsessed with his brand and this vintage brand.
Yeah.
And we really never thought about it. We were like, wow, how old is he? He said 95.
At that point, he was 95. Yeah. And so he told us how to run into him by accident on purpose by going to his women's shop. He still has a shop that he oversees. And we were like, at 95, he still goes to work. And Valentin said, yeah, every day. He shows up, he makes sure that things are to his liking. So he said, come in around 10 o'clock in the morning, usually something like a Tuesday morning when it's not busy, and you probably get a chance to meet him. So the next time we were in Paris, a year later, we did exactly that. And we walked into the store, dressed up, trying to impress.
Trying to get a picture with him. We did not even think we were going in to talk about a documentary. Yeah. We were like, he's way out of our league.
we were there showing Mansfield 66, 67, which is our last film
at a
film festival. And so as soon as we began talking to everybody in the shop, when we were American documentary filmmakers, they thought the reason we were there was to ask about making a film. And it just kind of escalated from there. So before we knew it, that was 10 o'clock in the morning. By 2 p.m., we were sitting down having coffee with Cardin, and he was asking us, when do you want to start and what do you want to do?
But it's, we
just like, wow.
When we interviewed Jean-Paul Gaultier and Philippe Starck, and they tell the same story that happened to us, right? They knew of him, they went to him, he looks into your eyes and he's like, you're the one, let's go. Yeah. And he's done that his whole career. And everyone who worked there said, yeah, same for me. He met me and he liked me and that was it. So he's got this sixth sense, right?
Clairvoyance.
Yeah.
So first of all, I want to say that the next time my husband and I are in Palm Springs, we would really like a ride in that AMC.
Right, there you go. Yeah, guaranteed.
I fell in love with that. I had no idea he made a car until I saw this film.
That's what got us the job. When he saw the car and he was like smiling, he was like, you guys drive this? And we said, oh yeah. And he's like, okay, what do you want to do?
Yeah. So now the car is a tax write-off because it got us the job.
Is it fair to say that, I don't mean this term pejoratively, but you're kind of Cardin fanboys?
Oh, we are. Yeah. No, it's funny because we were already sort of known for that in Palm Springs. People knew that we love the brand. We have things around our house about it. Friends, if they find something at a flea market or whatever, they'll bring it home and give it to us or tell us about it online.
We were obsessed.
Yeah. So we were already very into it. And even ultimately getting to be at a huge party celebrating the beginning of our film at Pierre Cardin's Palais Boulle in the south of France was like mind-blowing, because to us it was all, in books and ideas, and we never thought that we'd be sitting there.
A lot of dreams came true very quickly.
Yeah, it was very fun. Very fun to be involved with it. And it's funny because, we say this also about having worked with Cher. You think that these people are some kind of strange, unattainable, celebrities. And when you meet them and you work with them, they're just people, but extraordinarily so. So somebody like Cardin, it's like he's so present. He makes you feel comfortable, but you are obviously very aware of everything that stands behind him, the legacy of it. So it's quite an honor to sort of be in his presence and to have been allowed to have done what we've done.
I love thinking of you there at that incredible, much photographed house. It's like a little bit like being an Elvis fan at Graceland, I guess.
Yeah.
And being given free reign. Like, just do whatever you want, go wherever you want, shoot whatever you want. Oh, okay.
And the second time you go and it's becoming like old hat, right? We are so sick of eating at Maxine's.
Like, if I had dated Maxine's one more time.
Whenever we'd work with Pierre, he's so generous. He'd invite the entire crew to have dinner at Maxine's or somewhere else.
Yeah.
But because he loved meeting everyone. He loved meeting the sound guy. He'd strike up conversations with our interpreters.
Yeah.
And he just loved talking. He loves meeting people. He loves talking to people. And he loves creative people. So.
Maxime, that sounds awful. After 3 months of eating my own cooking, I have a lot of sympathy.
Well.
One of the things that really came across to me in this so beautifully was that some people might think of this as a fashion documentary, but really Cardin is so much more than just the clothes we think of. He's furniture design, he's historic preservation, he's lifestyle pieces, he's licensing, which we think of as branding. I mean, it's really a whole Cardin philosophy that I feel we walk away from this documentary exposed to. But how did you sort of figure out the entirety of the picture you wanted to tell?
What I was going to say, you said earlier, he imagined the future, but he created the future. I mean, so many of the things he did impact the way we live right now. He's an unsung hero. He really deserves the Pulitzer Prize because, you know, even down to he was the first to diversify the runway. Now that got us a head start in that direction, right? But he was the first. And once he did it, everyone said, oh, it's okay. Right. Before that, you'd never see anything but a white girl on a French runway. And then, you know, that he saw globalism, that he's, you know, corporatism. He kind of just, all these things he did are how we live today. It's really amazing.
And to your question, it's 70 years of creation, right? That's what he is this year. This is the 70th anniversary of his having opened his house in 1950. So it was mind-boggling. And that's why I say, you know, that there was a 4-hour cut where we included everything. But then you get to a certain point in making a documentary where you realize what we're trying to do is tell the story of the man and get people just curious and interested and wanting to know more about him. And so to try to catalog his entire work in a documentary, it's not that it gets boring, it's that it gets overwhelming. And so what we hope happens from it is that somebody would say, oh, I've got to know more. And there are books and there are museum shows going on. And, you know, you can go and look at, you know, even on YouTube, we're using sometimes just tiny clips of his fashion shows that you can go and watch and see, you know, the whole show. So we had to be kind of judicious in choices to try to make sure that we were giving this overall picture early on in the process when it was very sprawling and sort of impossible to rein in. We got our producer, Corey Coppola, looked over it with our sales agent at the time, Daniela Elster, and they said that they felt like we needed to focus the film into ideas instead of chronology. So that it was fashion and then design and then branding, globalism, his interest in theater, etc. And so to try to portray his ideas and his themes instead of trying to figure out how to, you know, keep everything straight in 70 years linearly. And that really helped. That was when I think we made the big breakthrough about how many.
And his character is so genuine, so authentic. And we had, you know, no one's made a documentary about him. He's never allowed it to be done. So we went to the French television archive with a plethora of, he's been on film, right? We had that film of him at the House of Dior. And he opened the House of Dior in 1945. And so we have interviews with him at every stage in his life. And what he's saying cuts together because he's always said the same thing, right? His story has not wavered. He's always been very true to himself.
Yeah. It's interesting with documentaries. A little bit, I think, like writing a screenplay. They begin to tell you what the story is once you get everything together. And so suddenly things are like, this has to stay in, this, as much as we love it, needs to leave. and just the, you know, the pieces begin to move around on you, and it starts to tell you, this is my character, this is what needs to be in my movie, you know, you guys are at service to me. And the documentary begins to kind of shape itself.
What struck me especially as being very modern was the branding aspect of it. Then when he started, it was called licensing, and it was about lending a name, lending a logo, lending a trademark. But it really was about selling a whole lifestyle. And then you have people in the documentary like Trina Turk who are very good at doing this, who are in some ways natural heirs to some of what Cardin did.
Yeah.
Did it surprise you that the business side of Cardin was as prolific as the artistic and the design side?
I think that that's a pretty well-known fact, that his business acumen was, you know, he's as talented of a businessman as he is a designer. But the extent of it, no, I mean, I think that, you know, the deeper in that we got, the more we discovered, you know, more products and ideas. The other thing that I think that we find about him is that there's always an idea underneath any given kind of concept. So it's not just that he's trying to figure out how to make more items and figure out how to sell you more things. It's not that kind of corporate invasion. It's more about the idea that you can surround yourself in an aesthetic and a beauty and participate in that in multiple ways in your life, and have beauty and technique and just style be part and parcel of who you are, and that kind of relationship to it enhances your life. I mean, I think the altruistic idea that lays under it is why it was so appealing, as opposed to, can you please put a big P on your chest?
But he really is an example. I don't think I've met anyone like him, where he did what he loved and the money followed, right? You always hear that. But how many of us can actually do that, because you got to pay the bills? But this guy really followed his heart, and, you know, was slapped for it, was punished for it.
Yeah.
And, you know, the rewards were huge.
It's like in the United States, people always say that they don't really know who he is, that he faded out of existence. Was it because he overbranded? Did he ruin his brand? But the truth of what happened is that somewhere around the 90s, he got tired of that over licensing of what was going on with him, and he retreated, sort of went back to Paris and felt like, well, why don't I just kind of, you know, pull this back in a little bit and figure out what I want to do? And he got himself, you know, so deeply involved in theater. So he's less known here for younger people. They didn't grow up with him like we did.
I was especially excited to see his connection to the performing arts. That Alice Cooper interview was one of the biggest surprises for me. I was looking at the list of interviews in this, and I thought, okay, Amy Fine-Collins, Sharon Stone, certainly under Gaultier. I can see how they would have something to say about Cardin. Alice Cooper, interesting. And there was actually a riot because of Alice Cooper at l'Espace Cardin.
Cardin, yeah, Espace Cardin. We have a book about Espace Cardin. It's all in French. We only speak minimal French, and we're going through it, sort of looking for what's interesting and what happened, and we found a picture of Alice Cooper, and then we were able to track down the footage that's in the film of Alice Cooper performing at Espace Cardin, and then we were like, well, we have to try to get him. So we asked him. He said yes immediately. It was
Once again, everything just seemed to be meant to be, right? It was so. I Googled him, and within half an hour, I was talking to his manager. Alice Cooper had said, oh yes, I'll gladly do this.
Yeah, we went to Las Vegas for that interview. It's not that far from Palm Springs. He was performing, and so he just we rented a suite so that we'd be able to film him. He came in, sat down, he said, I don't know if I'm going to have much to say. And a half an hour later, his handlers were having to pull him out of the room because he was having such a good time talking about those days in Cardin.
But he also went on about men's fashion. And he said, you know, back in the early 70s, men weren't sexy. It wasn't cool to wear tight clothes or something that looked nice. And he said Pierre Cardin really was the one who said men can be hot, right? They can be sexy too. And he said that same thing, Alain Delon was there. And he was like, he had such a man crush on him, and he was wearing this like Cardin outfit that was just so sexy.
Yeah.
So Pierre, Alice had, you know, he talked so much, and then, you know, these people see each other throughout, like Dionne Warwick, right? Season in the 70s, the 80s, right? They run into each other. And just the world of sophistication, right? These people that are just so elegant and have conversations with each other.
Cooper is such a surprise in many ways because he's really funny and really nice. And you're like, oh, aren't you the guy who, like, you know, does the electric chair on stage? And he's not the guy who rips a head off.
That's Ozzy.
That's Ozzy. But like you're expecting, I don't know, this sort of rabble-rouser walking into the room, and he's a sweetheart, really nice guy.
But Pierre was really confused at first, and then he was really touched that we got him in the film, because it shows his breadth of, you know, he loves experimental musical theater and is broad-minded enough to go, what's this guy doing? It's experimental musical theater, and brought it to Paris, and, you know.
So I have to ask about, I think, a very big get for you in this documentary among fashion people, and that's Ms. Naomi Campbell.
Yeah.
Was she a difficult get? Was she immediately excited to talk about Pierre with you? How did that go?
She was our first ask. Why? Because she is the only current celebrity that wears vintage Cardin on the red carpet. So we said, oh, that's interesting. And she's a model of color. And Cardin diversified the runway. She probably knows all about it.
Right.
So Corey reached out to her, and she said yes right away.
Yeah. And, you know, it's funny because people get these kind of reputations. She was a dream. She was on time. We had a 2 o'clock appointment with her, and it was at the museum, at the Musée Cardin. And it's a cobblestone street that leads down to it.
And it was July 3rd, and it was so hot.
Yeah, and at like 2:01, clack, 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 clack. Here comes Naomi walking
right
down
on time.
the cobblestone street, and we had to kind of. It was Fashion Week. It was during Fashion Week, and we had to hire her entourage, her makeup person, 2 stylists, a security guard,
hair.
And hair. It wasn't hair and makeup. It was hair and makeup, and so. They were all there already, and they went into sort of private office at the museum and were preparing everything. Naomi walks in looking absolutely gorgeous. She goes in, they plop a wig on her that they've you know, pre-styled for her in this nice kind of cool 60s style for us. They put the Pierre Cardin dress on her, it falls on her like that. Naomi's ready, like, okay. And she just asked, like, do you mind if I walk around and look at the museum before we sit down and do the interview? And so she get a little bit inspired, and then she was so generous. She was terrific. She
was really hoping to meet him that day. And we were going to do Naomi Campbell, then Pierre was going to come say hello, then Jean-Paul Gaultier was going to come over. The 3 of them were going to say hello, and then we're going to do Jean-Paul. But Pierre couldn't make it. It was just Naomi, and she was, you know, a trooper about it. Yeah. She was disappointed.
She's never met Pierre Cardin in person. In all the years, they've never actually crossed paths to personally meet. And so I don't know if it was the reason she said yes to doing the interview, but certainly she was looking forward to the opportunity to meet. So we're hoping now with our Paris premiere, if it still can hold together, September 21st, that we'll get that opportunity for the first time to put them together in the same room.
And then this is interesting. So in our previous career, do you know who Nigel Barker is? So we became good friends with him a long time ago. We actually ghost wrote his beauty book for girls, Nigel Barker's Beauty Equation. But so Nigel gave us the hookup to her people because he made that show The Face with her. So we did have like a very high introduction because she loves him, of course. Who doesn't? But
yeah, so that was our way in with Naomi, but she's just nothing but a dream, just lovely, smart, fun.
I love that you could possibly make this historic introduction happen sometime in Paris. It's inspiring because now that you mention it, I have seen her wear Cardin, not just in your movie. And I think it shows how timeless those pieces are. They're very much sum up the eras that he designed in, I think, in many ways. And yet you can take a Cardin dress out of its initial context and it still makes sense. It doesn't become a period piece or a costume in the way other work sometimes does.
Well, he does have a quote that he says, "I designed for a future that doesn't exist yet." And then Rodrigo in our film, Rodrigo is his nephew, right-hand man, and the baton is being passed to Rodrigo in the organization. And Rodrigo said, my uncle designs not for 10 years ahead, for 50 years ahead. So he said, right now, we're beginning to see that like what he designed in the mid-60s, his heyday, is like right on time.
One of the other enormous threads for this to me was that Cardin not only invented a lifestyle that you could buy into or that you could want to buy into, although some of it's very accessible, as the documentary shows. It was not all high, ready to wear or haute couture. But there's also sort of what I think of as sometimes an inherently queer passion for aesthetics, for details. I kept going back to Oscar Wilde the more I listened to Cardin talk about art, the more he talked about why something looks the way it does, but about dedication to a look. Do you think that there is sort of a queer narrative or a queer through line to Cardin's body of work?
I see what you mean, yeah. And then certainly with something like Oscar Wilde, it sort of plays back to the concept of wit. And that, you know, when you look at Cardin's pieces, they kind of make you smile, right? They're not just sort of this serious fashion, like Saint Laurent, it's much more serious. And Cardin is always kind of like having fun with us, I think. And certainly, you know, he was one of the first to approach the concept of androgyny, of, you know, of unisex clothing, that things, you know, were not necessarily for men or for women. He has quotes. What's the famous quote that he has about, or no, I think it's Tony Glenville says it in our film, that what you realized was that you didn't have to just, if you were a man, you weren't just trying to be sexy for a woman. And if you were a woman, you weren't necessarily just trying to be sexy for a man. You might be a man trying to be sexy for a man, or a woman trying to be sexy for a woman, or for both, or for neither. And it's like he was sort of opening up this idea and participating, I think, also, and helping to shape what was going on at that particular moment in culture in the 60s. So he's kind of part and parcel. Those things always kind of go back and forth. What came first? Was it the way that these designers were doing what they were doing, or was it that the culture was hungry for it and they answered the call? So, you know, he certainly is one of those people that when you look at his work, you don't think of sort of austerity and plainness and be simple inside of yourself, right? He's like, be wild, express yourself, be who you are. And that is so queer.
And his subversive forces for us, right? Introducing a cologne in a bottle shaped like a penis, which made every young adolescent boy go, ooh, this makes me feel funny. I remember as a kid, like, I wanted Pierre Cardin skis. And my dad said, you pay more for the name. They're just the same as the Sears skis. I was like, no, I got to have them. So definitely his queerness was, you know, infiltrating, certainly me at the time.
Yeah, I worked at the Broadway department store at Hollywood and Vine when I was 15, 16 years old. It was my first job. And Pierre Cardin was that fancy stuff. It was behind the counter. And in fact, even at that time, there was not really that stuff for men. So it already felt a little gay to want it. Like you were kind of like, oh, I want the thing that's special, that makes me different, that makes me stand out. You know, and you already knew, like if you were over at that counter, you were pushing it just a little bit. You were supposed to just go over there and get your, you know, beige shirt and forget about it. But like, you know, we were all sort of hungry towards that idea.
Ad for the cologne with the beautiful guy. Anyway, it ran in national magazines in the 70s. I posted it on Instagram and Facebook, and it was taken down, and I was banned from both for obscene material.
Speaking of rabble-rousers.
Yeah.
I love that he wasn't just imagining the future that that he wanted to live in. He was imagining a future that we're still not ready for.
Right, yeah, in many ways. In many ways, I think that's why Rodrigo says that he was designing for 50 years ahead, even of where we were. It's still hard for people. Like, we live a very colorful lifestyle with a house that has, you know, kind of expressive things in it. And you still get people walking in here going, oh, wow, oh, okay. You know, like, that's a lot. As opposed to sort of like, oh, what font? You know, a lot of people do that, but people will come in and sort of judge the idea that you're being exuberant. And I think that Pierre Cardin has always been about exuberance.
P. David, it has been a delight getting to chat with you about House of Cardin in your house that is filled with Cardin.
Our House of Cardin. Yeah,
And
exactly.
can I say hello to Stephanie Harvey, our friend who is watching today?
Thank you so much for being here, and thank you for being a part of Frameline44 Pride Digital Showcase.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Tony. I mean,